For nearly 30 years, Power Rangers has produced a new season and accompanying toy line each year. This surprises a lot of people. Many only ever see Power Rangers as being Mighty Morphin. Kinda not helped by the ongoing comic series and majority of modern toy releases. They don't even know that there are other incarnations or that there continue to be new series to this day. There are at this point literally thousands of Power Rangers toy releases ranging from 1993 all the way up to present day. And I'm definitely not suggesting that you do, but if you were to also collect Japan's Super Sentai, on which Power Rangers is based, that started 15 years before Power Rangers, and actually over the past decade there have been an additional 5 series which are unlikely to ever be adapted into Power Rangers. So yeah, if you were to focus your sights on Power Rangers only, look on the bright side, you're already shaving off 20 toy lines. So this video is for the benefit of those that have either never collected Power Rangers before and are looking to start, or for those of you who maybe used to collect the toys, maybe as kids, maybe you got rid of them and have since come to realise what a dreadful mistake that was, and now you need some help to get back in the game. The question being then, is it too late to start collecting Power Rangers toys? What do you think? Is it still possible, or has that ship long sailed? The answer, rather unhelpfully, I would say is yes and no. As with all retro, mass-produced toy lines, your ability to find them is going to be based on a number of factors like how old they are, how many were produced and sold to begin with, you're not actually likely to find that out, and how many owners are there out there who actually held on to all the pieces and coincidentally are now ready to release them to the highest bidder. There's definitely plenty of ways you could go. I think the vast majority will stick with just Mighty Morphin given that it's the most recognisable face of the brand. Most, but not all, will want maybe the entire Zordon era, which takes you up to the end of In Space, the 6th season of the show. Some of you may want to represent every season in some way, either partially or fully. So yeah, how comprehensively you do this will depend on how long it takes you to collect what you need. Let's push backwards in time, starting with the closest, the modern era. And as a general rule of thumb, I'd say you usually have a comfortable 10-year window, where the last decade of toys is relatively easy to get hold of. Beyond that though, I think you'll find availability will start to vary. What is the current season, Dino Fury, is surely going to be the easiest for you to buy at the moment, because it's going to have the most options. Just look out for it in supermarkets, on Amazon, in toy stores if you have any nearby. You'll probably want what I consider the 3 main components, which are the figures, the team of main rangers, their Zords as they start to be released, and Morphers, of which we've already got 1. Optionally, there'll always be other things outside of those categories that you can buy if you want. Things will release like roleplay weapons, there'll definitely be additional figures, which will be your only way to get the other accessories. So yeah, dive into that as broadly as you're comfortable with. Also, don't worry if you're not seeing much in stores at the moment, this season should be with us through the end of 2022. Jumping back a step to the 2019 and 2020 season, which was Beast Morphers, you should still be able to find new products for most things available online, maybe cheaper than what they were initially released as. Though a word of warning, as we are already starting to see scalping of some prices as products sell out, so definitely the rarer stuff and the stuff that was barely available to begin with. General distribution for this experimental first year from Hasbro was affected greatly, I'd say, both by the events of 2020 and Hasbro's decision to change the Zord releases into individual releases. Up until then, fans, and especially stores, had been used to a Megazord being one self-contained item that could be swapped out at various points throughout the series, rather than 5 big bulky boxes having to be sold concurrently. I would say now is the perfect time to snap up what you can, and a few years down the line, I think this will be a really interesting season for people to get their hands on. The obvious upshot for Beast Morphers is that you can do it really quickly. You could just get the Amazon exclusive Ultra Zord set, you may still be able to find the figure box set, and either one or both of the electronic Morphers. A tip though you may have seen in my Beast Morphers toy line review video, there is a bit of a downside to that figure box set, as they omit the Ranger keys which came with the individually carded versions. These are kind of that season's equivalent to the power coins, so if you do want them, make sure to get the individually carded figures. Jumping back again, Dino Charge and Ninja Steel are generally well-produced Bandai America years, the final ones of their run. You should be able to find the Dino Charge and Ninja Steel default Megazords really quite easily. They should be well mass produced and quite common on the aftermarket, fairly easy to get. The default Megazords they're usually sold in the most number of places. But unfortunately later Megazords down the line, like Terra Charge, Titano Charge and the Bull Rider, they're generally going to be more tricky pickups, because they had much less of a push behind them when they were released. By these seasons, you're really going to have to choose whether to buy cheap, second-hand, or expensive, new in box. You'll find the discrepancy in pricing here is likely to be huge. The price benefit definitely favours the second-hand option, but having the box and definitely all of the pieces, and actually Bandai America releases tending to wear out in joints more quickly, might endear you more to scalpers than you'd otherwise want to be. We could go into much more detail here, like how best to get all of the Dino Chargers and Ninja Stars to represent the whole team, and the Auxiliary Zords and how difficult they were to get hold of. But they kind of feel like other videos to me and I don't want to overload you. However, speaking of overloading you, in this period was also the third theatrical movie and that accompanying toy line. Though fortunately that's limited to the figures, the never seen on screen Morpher, and either an electronic or combined version of the Megazord, both of which are way out of scale with the usual TV series Megazords. Anyway, I'll leave that up to you whether you even want to collect that movie's toy line. Jumping back again, we've got Megaforce and Super Megaforce. Definitely an interesting duo of seasons because they briefly returned us to the original Power Rangers release schedule of one Super Sentai adaptation per year. The slight downside of that is it actually stresses the availability of releases, and other than the Gosei Great and Gosei Ultra Megazords, I think you may struggle here, especially to get hold of releases like the Q-Rex and the Turbo Falcon, but actually also the Auxiliary Zords. You've also got the bad timing of the scale change of the action figures to contend with, going from 4-inch to 5-inch. In Morpher terms, I think the Gosei Morpher you should be able to find cheap. And something very cool about that, you can actually print the trading cards off the internet, and the Morpher somehow is able to read the barcode, and that will save you a lot of money. However, just 1 year removed from that cheap way of doing things, you had Super Megaforce, famously with the Ranger keys, and there's no cheap way of doing that. Ranger keys, obviously an extremely successful collectible gimmick that they've kept coming back to ever since. I'm not going to lie to you, they were a nightmare to get hold of even as the show was airing. I'm pretty sure the back bulk of releases actually came out as Toys R Us America exclusives during the next series, so that gives you a bit of a clue of what you're up against. Yeah, maybe don't bank on being able to get your Ranger key collection of practically every default Power Ranger up to that point. Not that it's not possible, just that it could be considered a collection all of its own. 2011 and 2012, Samurai and Super Samurai actually felt like the closest we'd been to the original Mighty Morphin pop culture phenomenon. At least here in England, it felt like the toys were everywhere again, in all the supermarkets, toy stores, readily available online. We got multiple releases for the default Samurai Megazord in both years of the toy line, though like with Megaforce, getting some of the other pieces were limited to their own accessory vehicle sets. The figures were definitely extensively produced, and some stores near me even had them at 75% off at points. The two versions of the Morpher, the Samuraiser, that's a bit harder to find, and I think you definitely want the second version. Back again, and skipping past the MMPR 2010 toy line, you'll find us in the latter half of the Disney era, and it's going to be a mixed bag. From a variation of releases between Disney Store and regular retail versions, to dwindling interest in the brand from its owner of the time, you could tell Bandai America still wanted it to succeed, and Jungle Fury and kind of RPM were two seasons that had probably the best basic action figures from them ever. Your RPM Zords will be the standard Golden Egg Hunt, but the benefit being they do all fit together into their Ultra Zord combination at the end. Unfortunately though, the full Zord releases from Jungle Fury and Operation Overdrive are a lot more confusing, and I'll have to fully research that and go over it in a different video. Mystic Force had a Megazord that was only released in Europe, but technically it is possible to get Power Rangers versions of all those Zords at least. That's more than you can say for most of the Disney seasons. That's not to say though that some of the Disney seasons aren't still readily available. I would say the first few, especially Ninja Storm, Dino Thunder and SPD, are still widely available on the aftermarket. As ever though, the additional Megazords further back into each season are unfortunately going to pose you a challenge. Ninja Storm and Dino Thunder also introduced us to this collectible gimmick idea for the Morpher. So there's not only multiple devices for the team, but different components that make them unique, like Ninja Storm with the power discs, Dino Thunder with the Morpher faceplates. Move back even further into the original Saban era and you find another mixed experience. Seasons like Time Force, Wild Force are likely less common in terms of showing up on the aftermarket, as the show had drifted to the end of its first decade, with slightly less interest than before, I'd say. As with most of these early seasons, they luckily only have 2 Morphers for each series and no additional pieces to collect in order to use them. I would say the Zords are well liked and worth getting, though you will find them to be rare and expensive. Zeo, Turbo, In Space, Lost Galaxy and Lightspeed Rescue, not to sugarcoat it, but you're going to struggle. There's definitely a fondness there for each of those seasons, and they are some of the oldest non-pop culture phenomenon Power Rangers toys going. Each season has a minimum of 4 and maximum of 6 Zord releases, though as we've mentioned you could, if you were being frugal, just stick with the default Megazords. Though I would say for Lightspeed Rescue that kind of robs it of a lot of the enjoyment you get from combining it with 2 of the other releases that I've been reviewing lately. Also to acknowledge again that Omega Megazord wasn't released in Europe this time, just America. Kind of the inverse of what happened with Mystic Force's Centaurus Wolf. Figures at this time were definitely going through something of a developmental period, and you may struggle with finding good intact copies as the plastic was quite brittle in places, it's prone to yellowing. There also were quite a lot of accessories back then. A lot of accessories that unfortunately could have been lost over the decades. The Morphers for each season have unfortunately gone from $10 to sometimes 10 times that. It's wild how coveted these items are now, their scarcity and desirability probably being down to conventions and the rise of cosplaying which exploded the value of them. It's funny when you hear stories from cast members saying that props department would actually buy Morphers off the shelf for use in the show whenever one broke. That's why these things are so beloved, because they are, in a sense, the real deal. And now we're back with the original Mighty Morphin seasons 1, 2 and 3. This is interesting. Undeniably, there were a lot of toys sold during these 3 years because Power Rangers had been such a pop culture phenomenon, and also because of that there have been a lot of newer modern replacements available, which gives you even more additional options if you weren't that fussed about going retro. Luckily as well, all these newer versions of the releases have kind of helped pull the prices down of the originals, and it's probably also pushed more of them onto the aftermarket, as the original buyers are more likely to let go of their original products to replace them with something newer, maybe nicer. Hasbro are off to a good start, currently doing well here too, redoing the Morpher, Dragon Dagger and so far 2 of the helmets in their roleplay line. Honestly, they're worth the pickup. Bandai America's Legacy line did die-cast collector versions of the main roleplay items a few years prior, and these are really great too. Other than, of course, the SH figure arts, I would say that the breadth of the Lightning Collection versions of the figures has never been better for Mighty Morphin. Though there are plenty of alternatives out there, the old MMPR 2010 incarnations, the 2014 and 2016 Legacy figures, and the upcoming Super 7s or collectible 12-inch figures if you really don't care about when they were produced. In terms of the Zords, you could go retro or you could go Bandai Legacy for nearly all of them. It was just Tor the Shuttle Zord, Lord Zed Serpentera, Ninja, the Shogun Megazord most famously, and the Alien Rangers Battleborgs from the Mighty Morphin seasons which didn't get Legacy versions. Yeah, also on that note, good luck even getting a retro set of the Alien Rangers and Battleborgs figures. Also rare, of course, are the Season 2 Fliphead figures, that being your new cast, Rocky, Adam and Aisha, and Tommy as the White Ranger. He at least got a couple reissue re-releases over the years, like the Gold Team pack with the Green Ranger, but yeah, still a very scarce one to come by for a good price. So in sum, Morphers are gold dust. Figures are a bit of a mixed bag, and quite hard to buy in whole sets, but you should find Red Rangers were produced in such high quantities that you will be able to represent each season with one. And Zords give you quite a bit of flexibility. We've not even mentioned, but you also have the Bandai Japan versions, and in some cases even Korean versions to look at. My advice would be to find the Japanese Sentai equivalent name of the Megazord you're looking for and set up eBay search alerts for both. Up until Mystic Force, which was season 14 of Power Rangers, the Japanese and American Zord lines are entirely interchangeable. So if you are aiming to get all Zord releases from each season, you could mix and match Power Rangers with Super Sentai there. Just be aware though that with their own molds, Bandai America do start to compromise on functionality from the Japanese original, which really affects some seasons more than others. Check out my video on the top 5 Megazords to buy from Japan for some help with that. Power Rangers is this big, behemoth, ever-changing thing that represents so much history of the show. Personally, it looks to me like Hasbro want to simplify things and cut off the current continuity from whatever newness they have mapped out from 2023 onwards. I think that's why Beast Morphers and now Dino Fury are wrapping things up in a really respectful, bow-tying kind of way. Maybe a new continuity for Power Rangers will help new fans who are just too overwhelmed by where to start when collecting a 30-year toy line. That's fine though, I totally get it. You definitely don't need to collect everything. Power Rangers is Power Rangers is Power Rangers. It's always the same, but different. But I understand there will always be super fans. There will always be those of us that want to dive into the past and get as much out of it as we can, because what a rich past it is. Something that I really appreciate about Power Rangers toys is that they're not in any way tethered to the era that they're produced in. You don't need like a composite cable or an in-app purchase to an app that no longer works on a current software in order to get your enjoyment out of these things. You literally can pull them out of the past into present day, and provided they've been looked after, experience it in exactly the same way as if you'd bought it anywhere between 1993 and today. I would say that's the best reason I can give you that no, even now, it's still not too late to start collecting Power Rangers toys. Good luck, and let me know how you get on.